Hey everyone, and welcome to the Wellbeing Podcast. I am so glad you are here with us today as we take a deep dive into letting go of perfectionism. We are going to be looking at a ton of research articles and opinions from all sorts of experts, and hopefully by the end you will understand what perfectionism is, how it affects you, and how to maybe let go of some of it to live a happier and more fulfilling life.
Yeah, it's funny. Perfectionism is usually seen as a good thing, right? Like a sign that you are ambitious and have high standards for yourself. But the truth is, it's not always that simple.
Right. Like, I think we all want to do a good job, but when does it cross the line from just wanting to do well into perfectionism?
That's a great question. So, perfectionism is really about setting these super high standards for yourself that are like almost impossible to reach. And then it's also usually paired with a fear of failure and just hating any kind of criticism. And there are a few different ways this can show up in people's
Oh,
lives.
really?
Yeah, so some people direct it all inwards, towards themselves. That's called self-oriented perfectionism.
Okay, that makes sense.
And then some people project it outwards onto other people and hold everyone else to these impossible standards. We call that other-oriented perfectionism.
And then others are just kind of stuck in the middle.
Kind of. There's one more type. It's called socially prescribed perfectionism.
Okay, what is that one?
It's this feeling that, like, everyone around you, like the whole world, expects you to be perfect.
Oh gosh, that one sounds exhausting. Like you are carrying the weight of everyone else's expectations on your shoulders all the time.
Exactly. And that's when it really starts to become a problem because it stops being about trying to be your best and becomes this fear of not being good enough no matter what you do. And that can have some real consequences.
Yeah, I bet. It can't be good for you to be that stressed all the time.
You are right. There's a study from clinical psychological science that found that people with this socially prescribed perfectionism, well, they were actually 30% more likely to experience severe depression.
Wow, 30%. That's really high. I mean, I always thought perfectionism could be stressful, but that's kind of scary. So is there like a good kind of perfectionism? I mean, we all want to improve ourselves, right?
You are definitely right. There is a difference between what we call adaptive and maladaptive perfectionism.
Oh, okay. So what's the difference?
It's kind of like imagine an athlete who trains really hard and always wants to win, but they also know that they are going to lose sometimes, and they see those losses as opportunities to get better. They have high standards, but it doesn't stop them from trying.
Okay, I see. So that would be adaptive.
Exactly. And then maladaptive perfectionism is more like someone who's so afraid of failing that they don't even try. Like a student who's too afraid to take a challenging course because they might not get an A.
So they are actually limiting themselves because they are so scared of not being perfect.
Yeah, pretty much.
That makes a lot of sense. So it's more about how we deal with those bumps in the road.
Exactly.
But you mentioned some pretty serious consequences earlier. What else does this maladaptive perfectionism do to people?
Oh, it can do a lot. I mean,
Uh,
besides the higher risk of anxiety and depression, it can even lead to suicidal thoughts.
wow.
It's a lot to carry. And it also affects people in other ways.
Like what?
Well, it can actually make it harder to achieve your goals.
Really?
It sounds counterintuitive, but there was this study, a meta-analysis actually, published in the Journal of Personality, and they found that perfectionists are actually less likely to reach their goals because they procrastinate so much and are so afraid of failing.
So they want to achieve so badly that they end up sabotaging themselves.
Basically.
Wow, I'm starting to see how this could really seep into like all aspects of your life.
Yeah, for sure. It can affect your work, your relationships, your creativity, pretty much everything.
So we've heard all about the downsides of perfectionism, but I am sure everyone listening is wondering what they can do about it. Like, how do you break free from this perfectionism trap?
The good news is there are lots of things you can do. One thing that can help a lot is developing what we call a growth mindset.
Okay, what's that?
It's this idea from Dr. Carol Dweck at Stanford. Basically, she found that people who see challenges as a chance to learn and grow rather than as a threat, they actually do way better.
How much better are we talking?
Like 20–25% better.
Wow, okay, that's a big difference.
It's all about progress, not perfection.
That makes sense. If you take off some of that pressure to be perfect right now, it makes things a lot easier.
Ah.
What else can we do to kind of get rid of these perfectionist habits?
Another big one is setting realistic goals. Instead of aiming for something huge and overwhelming that feels impossible, try breaking it down into smaller steps. Studies have shown that this can actually lead to a 42% increase in getting stuff done.
42%. That's
Oh.
amazing. I guess even just breaking down tasks into smaller chunks can make a huge difference. Are there any other strategies that you find helpful in dealing with perfectionism?
I think one of the most important ones, especially for people who struggle with perfectionism, is practicing self-compassion.
Oh, yeah, like being kind to yourself.
Exactly. Perfectionists are often so hard on themselves, but learning to be kind to yourself, especially when you mess up, is super important.
So how do we do that? How do we actually practice self-compassion?
Well, there are lots of ways. One thing you can do is try to talk to yourself the same way you would talk to a friend who is going through a hard time. Would you be super critical and judgmental, or would you be supportive and understanding?
That's a good point. We're usually much harder on ourselves than we are on other people.
Exactly. And it's not just about being nice to yourself, it's also about remembering that you're not alone in this.
What do you mean?
I mean, everyone makes mistakes, everyone has setbacks, everyone has moments where they feel like they aren't good enough.
Oh, I see. So it's about recognizing that we're all human.
Exactly. We're all in this together.
Okay, so self-compassion, what else can we do?
Another helpful thing is to try and challenge those perfectionist thoughts.
Like how?
Well, perfectionism often involves what we call all or nothing thinking.
Oh, what's that?
It's when you see things as either perfect or a total failure, with no in between.
Like black and white thinking.
Exactly. And it's really important to learn how to replace those thoughts with a more balanced perspective.
Could you give us an example?
Sure, like let's say you're giving a presentation and you stumble over a few words. Instead of thinking, I messed up this whole presentation, you could try thinking, okay, I stumbled a bit, but overall I think I did a good job and got my message across.
So it's about recognizing that effort and progress are valuable even if things aren't perfect.
Exactly. And of course, you can always seek professional help if you are struggling.
Yeah, like therapy.
Right. Therapies like cognitive behavioral therapy have been shown to be super effective in helping people with perfectionism. Studies have shown a 70% success rate in reducing perfectionistic thoughts and behaviors.
Wow, that's really good. So there are a lot of things we can do to tackle this, from changing our mindset to talking to a professional. I am curious, though, what happens when we actually start to let go of perfectionism? Does life just become easy and stress-free?
Well, it's not magic. It's not about suddenly not caring about quality or effort anymore. It's more about finding that balance between striving for excellence
Yeah.
and accepting that we're all human and we all make mistakes.
Right, like we're never going to be perfect.
Exactly. And actually, research shows that people who embrace imperfection are often more authentic and creative.
Really?
They also tend to feel more fulfilled because they aren't chasing this impossible ideal of perfection.
That makes sense. So it's about freedom from that pressure to be perfect all the time.
Exactly. And there's actually data to support this. The American Psychological Association did a survey and found that people who prioritize self-compassion and realistic goals, well, they reported 30% higher life satisfaction than those who are stuck in that perfectionist mindset.
So basically, letting go of perfectionism can make you happier and healthier.
Pretty much.
Wow, I like the sound of that. So it sounds like all that energy we usually spend trying to be perfect can be used for things that really matter, like relationships, passions, and personal growth.
Exactly. It frees us up to live more fully and authentically.
Okay, so I am definitely starting to see the benefits of letting go of perfectionism.
Yeah.
But I also want to hear about how this all works in the real world. Like, are there actual people who have embraced imperfection and seen a positive impact on their lives?
Absolutely. There's this amazing researcher and storyteller named Brené Brown.
Oh, I've heard of her.
She has this great book called The Gifts of Imperfection that goes really deep into the connection between perfectionism and, well, pretty much everything.
That's a big topic.
Yeah.
So what does she have to say about perfectionism?
Her main message is that perfectionism often comes from a deep fear of being judged. Like, we try to be perfect because we're terrified of what people will think if we're not.
It's like we're building this wall of perfection to protect ourselves from criticism.
Exactly.
And that makes sense, but I guess it can also be really isolating.
You're right. That wall might seem protective,
Yeah.
but it actually prevents us from connecting with people in a real and meaningful way.
Wow, that's a powerful image. So how do we start to break down that wall? Like, how do we embrace self-compassion instead of perfectionism?
Well, Brené Brown breaks down self-compassion into three core elements: self-kindness, common humanity, and mindfulness.
Okay, I am intrigued. Can you explain what each of those means?
Yeah, so self-kindness is basically treating yourself with the same kindness and understanding that you would treat a good friend who is going through something tough.
So it's about being gentle with yourself,
But
even when you mess up.
exactly. It's about recognizing that you're human, you're going to make mistakes, and that those mistakes don't define you.
I think that's a really important reminder for all of us, especially those of us who tend to be really hard on ourselves.
Absolutely.
We're usually way quicker to forgive other people than we are to forgive ourselves.
You're so right. And that's where common humanity comes in. It's recognizing that you're not alone in your struggles. Everyone makes mistakes, everyone faces setbacks, everyone has those moments where they feel inadequate. It's all part of being human.
So it's about acknowledging that we're all in this together, imperfections and all.
Precisely. And finally, mindfulness is about being present with your thoughts and feelings without judging them.
Oh, mindfulness. Okay.
It's about noticing those critical thoughts, those feelings of inadequacy, and just letting them be there without getting swept away by them.
Okay, I have to admit, mindfulness is the one I always struggle with the most. It sounds great in theory, but how do you actually do it? Especially when those perfectionistic thoughts start creeping in.
One simple but really powerful practice is to focus on your breath. Just notice the rise and fall of your chest, the coolness of the air as you breathe in, and the warmth as you breathe out. It's a really grounding technique that brings you back to the present moment.
So it's like hitting the pause button on that inner critic.
Exactly.
Okay, that's a great tip. So bringing it all back to the big picture, what does Brene Brown's work tell us about overcoming perfectionism?
Her work really highlights that the path to letting go of perfectionism is paved with self-compassion. It's about recognizing that we are worthy just as we are. Our worth isn't based on our achievements or what other people think of us.
So it's about shifting from a fear-based mindset of, I have to be perfect to be worthy, to a more love-based mindset of, I am worthy, imperfections and all.
Exactly. And that is a huge shift. It allows us to be our true selves, to take risks, to make mistakes, and to learn and grow from those experiences without being held back by fear of judgment.
I love that. It sounds like a much more freeing way to live.
It definitely is.
But what about those times when we really want to excel? Like when we have goals that require us to push ourselves and strive for our best. Is it possible to do that without falling back into the perfectionism trap?
Of course. It's all about finding that balance between striving for excellence and accepting that we're not perfect. It's about setting high standards for yourself while being willing to adjust course and learn from your mistakes along the way.
So it's about being mindful of our goals and our approach, but also about being mindful of how we talk to ourselves.
Exact.
Are we encouraging ourselves with kindness and understanding, or are we constantly putting ourselves down?
That's a great point. It's about being your own best cheerleader, not your own worst critic.
I love that.
And when we can do that, when we can approach our goals with a growth mindset and a healthy dose of self-compassion, that's when we really reach our full potential.
That's so inspiring. This whole conversation has been so insightful. I feel like I have a totally new understanding of perfectionism and, more importantly, how to be kinder to myself and live a more fulfilling life.
That's great to hear. And remember, this is a journey, not a destination. You're going to have times when you fall back into those old perfectionist habits. But the key is to notice it, be kind to yourself, and gently guide yourself back to that path of self-compassion and growth.
It's a really reassuring message. It takes the pressure off having to be perfect all the time.
Exactly. We're all works in progress, and that's perfectly okay.
Well said. So as we start to wrap up this deep dive into letting go of perfectionism, what's the one thing you want our listeners to take away from this conversation?
If there's one thing I hope everyone remembers, it's this. You are worthy just as you are. You don't have to be perfect to be loved, to be successful, or to be happy. Embrace your imperfections, celebrate your progress, and know that you are enough.
I love that. You are enough. Those are words we all need to hear more often. So to recap what we've learned today, perfectionism is more than just wanting to do a good job. It's a mindset that can actually have some pretty serious consequences for our mental health, our productivity, and our overall well-being. But the good news is that we don't have to let it control us. We've talked about some really powerful strategies that we can use to break free from its grip, like embracing a growth mindset, setting realistic goals, practicing self-compassion, challenging those perfectionist thoughts, and seeking professional help when we need it.
And we've learned that the key to all of this is really cultivating self-compassion, recognizing that we are worthy just as we are, imperfections and all.
It's about progress, not perfection, and it's about being kind to ourselves along the way. So to wrap things up, I want to leave our listeners with a thought-provoking question. Think about an area in your life where perfectionism might be holding you back. It could be at work, in your relationships, or even in your hobbies. What's one small step you can take today to start shifting your mindset and moving towards a more compassionate and fulfilling life?
That's a great question to reflect on. And remember, even the smallest step in the right direction can make a world of difference. Be patient with yourself, celebrate your progress, and never underestimate the power of self-compassion.
Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive into letting go of perfectionism. We hope you found it insightful and empowering. Remember, you are capable of amazing things just as you are. Until next time, keep learning, keep growing, and keep diving deep.
And remember, self-compassion is a practice, not a perfection. Be kind to yourself along the way.
Thanks again for listening to the Wellbeing Podcast. Take care, stay inspired, and we'll see you next time.
Of course. So self-kindness is all about treating yourself with the same gentleness and understanding that you would extend to a close friend who's going through a tough time. It's about recognizing that you're human, you're going to make mistakes, and that those mistakes don't define your worth.
Yeah, I think that's such an important reminder for all of us, especially those of us who are really hard on ourselves. We often forgive others so much easier than we forgive ourselves.
You hit the nail on the head there, and that's where common humanity comes in. It's the recognition that you're not alone in your struggles.
Okay.
Everyone makes mistakes, everyone faces setbacks, everyone has those moments where they feel inadequate. It's all part of the shared human experience.
Right, so it's about acknowledging that we're all in this together, imperfections and all, right?
Precisely. And finally, mindfulness is about being present with your thoughts and feelings without judgment. It's about noticing those critical thoughts, those feelings of inadequacy, and simply allowing them to be there without getting swept away by them.
Okay, mindfulness. I have to admit, that's the one I always struggle with the most. It sounds great in theory, but how do we actually, do that? Do you have any practical tips for cultivating mindfulness, especially when those perfectionistic thoughts start to creep in?
One simple yet powerful practice is to just focus on your breath. Notice the rise and fall of your chest, the coolness of the air as you inhale, and the warmth as you exhale. It's a very grounding technique that brings you back to the present moment and creates a little space between you and those swirling thoughts.
I love that. It's like hitting the pause button on that inner critic. So bringing it all back to the bigger picture, what does Brene Brown's work tell us about overcoming perfectionism?
Her work highlights that the path to letting go of perfectionism is paved with self-compassion. It's about recognizing that our worthiness is inherent, not dependent on our achievements or on what others think of us.
It's about shifting from that fear-based mindset of I have to be perfect to be worthy to a more love-based mindset of I am worthy, imperfections and all.
Exactly. And that's a profound shift. It frees us to be our authentic selves, to take risks, to make mistakes, and to learn and grow from those experiences without the fear of judgment holding us back.
I'm feeling inspired, but I'm also wondering, what about those times when we genuinely want to excel? When we have goals that require us to push ourselves and strive for our best? Is there a way to do that without falling into the perfectionism trap?
That's a great question. And the answer is a resounding yes. It's all about finding that sweet spot between striving for excellence and accepting our imperfections. It's about setting high standards for yourself while holding those standards with an open hand, with a willingness to adjust course and to learn from setbacks along the way.
So it's about being intentional with our goals and our approach, and also about being mindful of our self-talk. Are we encouraging ourselves with kindness and understanding, or are we constantly berating ourselves for every little misstep?
Precisely. It's about being your own best cheerleader, not your own worst critic.
And when we can do that, when we can approach our goals with a growth mindset and a healthy dose of self-compassion, that's when we truly unlock our potential. This has been so insightful. I feel like I have a whole new perspective on perfectionism and, more importantly, on how to cultivate a healthier and more compassionate approach to life in general.
I'm glad to hear that. And remember, this is a journey, not a destination. There will be times when you fall back into those familiar perfectionistic patterns. But the key is to notice it, to be kind to yourself, and to gently guide yourself back to that path of self-compassion and growth.
That's such a reassuring message. Takes the pressure off of having to be perfect all the time.
Exactly. We're all works in progress, and that's perfectly okay.
Well said. So as we wrap up this deep dive into letting go of perfectionism, what's the one thing you want our listeners to take away from this conversation?
If there's one thing I hope our listeners remember, it's this. You are worthy just as you are. You don't have to be perfect to be loved, to be successful, or to be happy. Embrace your imperfections, celebrate your progress, and know that you are enough.
I love that. You are enough. Those are words we all need to hear more often. So to recap what we've learned today, perfectionism is more than just wanting to do a good job. It's a mindset that can have serious consequences for our mental health, our productivity, and our overall well-being. But the good news is that we don't have to let it control us. We've explored some powerful strategies we can use to break free from its grip, including embracing a growth mindset, setting realistic goals, practicing self-compassion, challenging perfectionistic thoughts, and seeking professional help when needed.
And we've learned that the key to unlocking all of this is to cultivate self-compassion, to recognize that we are worthy, imperfections and all.
It's about progress, not perfection, and it's about being kind to ourselves along the way. So to wrap things up, I want to leave our listeners with a thought-provoking question to ponder. Think about an area in your life where perfectionism might be holding you back. It could be at work, in your relationships, or even in your hobbies. What's one small step you can take today to start shifting your mindset and moving towards a more compassionate and fulfilling life?
That's a great question to reflect on. And remember, even the smallest step in the right direction can make a world of difference. Be patient with yourself, celebrate your progress, and never underestimate the power of self-compassion.
Yeah, it's so easy to get caught up in this idea that, we have to be perfect to be accepted and successful and loved.
Right, like we are chasing this perfect version of ourselves that doesn't even
And
exist.
we miss out on so much in the process. The truth is our imperfections are what make us unique and interesting. They make us human.
So how do we change how we think about this? How do we go from fearing imperfection to embracing it?
Well, one really powerful way is to practice gratitude for our imperfections. Instead of seeing them as flaws, try to see them as opportunities to learn and grow.
Okay, so it's like we're reframing those things we see as flaws and using them as stepping stones.
Yeah, exactly. Every mistake, every setback, every imperfection is a chance to learn something new about ourselves. It helps us become more resilient and stronger. I think sometimes we forget that you have to make mistakes in order to learn and grow. That's how we get better at things, how we learn new stuff, and ultimately how we become the best versions of ourselves.
You are absolutely right. And when we embrace that, when we see our mistakes as valuable lessons instead of failures, that's when we can really reach our full potential.
This has been such an amazing conversation. I feel like I have so many new tools to deal with perfectionism and just to live a happier and more compassionate life in general.
I'm so glad to hear that. And remember, it's a journey, not a destination. There will be times when those perfectionist tendencies come back. But the key is to be patient with yourself, keep practicing those self-compassion strategies, and celebrate every step you take towards embracing your perfectly imperfect self.
I love that. So as we wrap up this deep dive into letting go of perfectionism, I want to leave everyone listening with a simple but powerful reminder. You are enough just as you are. You don't have to be perfect to be loved, to be successful, or to be happy. Embrace your imperfections, celebrate your progress, and remember that true beauty lies in authenticity.
Beautifully said. And remember, self-compassion is a practice, not a perfection. Be kind to yourself along the way.
Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive. We hope you found it helpful. Until next time, keep learning, keep growing, and keep diving deep.
See you next time.
Thanks for listening to the Wellbeing Podcast. Take care, stay inspired, and we will see you next time.